Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is the October 9th special meeting of the Planning Commission. We are happy to have you here and we hope for a spirited discussion. We also would ask you to please call everybody to order. So if I would start with Commissioner Morton.
Here.
And Commissioner Davis.
Present.
Commissioner Dewar.
Here.
Commissioner Packard.
Here.
I am Janice Huxford. I am your vice chair. I will be filling in for our chair, Davis. No relation whatsoever, by the way. He is doing a dual role tonight at the schools. And so when he arrives, he can join us in mid-meeting and decide whether or not he's going to take over the meeting from that point on. So with permission of the commission, can we not excuse Commissioner Davis? Can we just have him noted as joining mid-meeting?
I move that as so said.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. If you would all please, who can and are able, join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. So we are I'm going to try to explain the meeting a little bit as we go along. I think that might help because several of you have not been a part of Planning Commission. The first, our restrooms are right around the corner on this side of the building. So if you need to, it's a big circle. You'll wind up there sooner or later. The second thing is there are some handouts. Of course, everything was online, but there are some handouts that are in the back of the room. If you have not picked up a letter that was included came in after the packet was posted and the capital facilities program information, that's on the back table. So help yourself to that. The other things that we are going to do are take you through a little bit of the process tonight. What we start first with is any guest business that has nothing to do with the comp plan. So the comp plan is what we are discussing tonight. But if there's anything as citizens of Lake Stevens or our friends of Lake Stevens that you want to discuss that is not comp plan related, we'd ask that you join us at the podium. Seeing none? Yes, ma'am. I would be happy to. So the comp plan is going to be discussed by city staff, but it is the comprehensive plan that designs the vision for Lake Stevens for the next 10 years. We have to do this every 10 years based on what is going on currently with our legislature and what is going on currently with what is in Lake Stevens. It consists of a lot of different parts, and I'll go into those or have David go into those more in depth. But we have been spending the last year as a planning commission, we volunteer our time to do this. And we have been spending the last year talking about transportation and economic growth and land use and some of the permitting things and the capital expenditures, what we're going to budget for when it comes to sidewalks and other things. So all of that is in the comp plan, and it is by requirement, we have to have that every single 10 years. Okay? Rules of the podium. So when you do reach the podium, and we ask that you sign in so that if you want to speak, that your name is on the list that's at the podium. But when you reach the podium, we ask that you give your name, your address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. If there is something that has already been discussed or something that was discussed in this meeting when it began last week, we kept it open just for this purpose, then if you want to add on anything for a minute, by all means do. But we'll try to keep the meeting efficient by hearing any of the new concerns that might be on your mind. And if I will invite you up. I'll always give someone on deck so you can be prepared. Come up, please introduce yourself, your address, and then you'll get 3 minutes. Questions? All right. With that, I will turn the time over to city staff, David Leviton.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. David Levitan, Senior Planner. So we are here tonight for the continuation of the public hearing, the Planning Commission's public hearing on the comprehensive plan. Thank you to Vice Chair Huxford for that summary of what a comprehensive plan is. It's basically a 20-year, essentially, vision for growth for the city. So looking at things like land use, transportation, capital facilities, public services, basically looking at them holistically and developing goals and policies that provide the regulatory framework and that are implemented through things such as the municipal code, the city's development code, its zoning map, different programs. So basically it establishes the framework and the vision for how the city should look in 20 years. And then that's implemented through different codes and ordinances and programs and policies. So I'm just going to give a really quick presentation. I gave a little bit more of an in-depth one last week. I did want to start just because I have heard a number of concerns from residents, especially of Hasco Properties, Housing Authority of Snohomish County, that saw some of the land use notice signs that were posted there. So just to clarify on those, so the comprehensive plan, as part of that, we look at potential amendments to our future land use map, which is part of the comprehensive plan. And then there's a zoning map, which basically implements the future land use map. So there's general categories, high density residential, kind of medium density residential, waterfront residential. Those are in the comprehensive plan. Then we have more specific zoning designations within our zoning code or our development code, which is Title 14 of the municipal code. So as part of this process, we do need to have some potential amendments to our land use map and to our zoning map to increase capacity for multifamily residential housing that is potentially affordable at income levels at 80% or below of area median income. So that varies depending on the size of your household. But basically, we have a documented need in 2044 to provide more housing that is affordable to some of our lower income residents. And so that is a new part of the Growth Management Act, which at the state level basically guides cities as they develop their comprehensive plan. So we do have a couple of map amendments, primarily along 20th Street Southeast and a couple other areas that are specifically designed to increase residential capacity. We also have a lot more amendments that are basically more housekeeping amendments, and that is what applies to properties such as the Craigmont and the Glenwood Apartments. So basically, for those two, they are existing multifamily residential developments run by the Housing Authority, but they have single-family residential zoning. So basically, they would be considered a legal non-conforming use. So as part of this process, which is kind of at the 30,000-foot level, basically establishing the framework for future potential development, we wanted to clean up our zoning map to basically provide zoning that was consistent with existing development. So, for example, the Glenwood Apartments is zoned, I believe, RA12 currently, and we're proposing to rezone that to multifamily residential, which is a zone that allows for apartments. RA12 does not allow for apartments. So we're not proposing any specific development. We're not going to force anybody to leave. We value and treasure our partnership with the Housing Authority, and they are the experts in providing housing, at certain income levels, and we wouldn't do anything to jeopardize that. And so I just wanted to clarify that and to try to alleviate any concerns that the city's planning on demolishing any structures or forcing anyone out. A big part of our analysis of housing needs has been specifically on displacement risks and making sure that we're not forcing out existing residents and basically creating a situation where redevelopment could lead to the displacement of existing residents, especially lower income residents. So I just wanted to lead off the meeting with that. Happy that everyone is here. I'm happy to answer any additional questions as the commissioners get into their discussion and deliberation, and we welcome any public comments, but I did want to get that out. So just a little bit on this. So this is a continuation of the October 2nd meeting. There were a couple of new attachments that were provided as part of the October 9th meeting packet. The commission should continue to rely primarily on the October 2nd packet, which has been appended with these additional, supplemented with these additional materials. So there's attachments 7 and 8 that were in the published October 9th packet. There were also handouts tonight, attachment 9, which is additional public comments that we received since the October 9th packet was published last week. And then attachment 10, which is updated 6 and 20-year capital improvement plan tables, basically talks about what the city has basically committed to or established as priorities for capital facility improvements to accommodate the projected growth on the employment side of things, on the transportation side of things, on the housing side of things, making sure that the city is concurrent between its capital improvements and the anticipated impacts of future development. That's a central tenet of the Growth Management Act, something that we need to do. We need to make sure that there's adequate services, utilities, capital facilities in place to accommodate projected growth. So we did provide some updated tables for this evening. That's primarily the City Council's purview as far as kind of establishing the budget and the budget priorities for capital projects. But the Planning Commission does have a role in providing their recommendation on tables 9.1 and 9.2. So as Vice Chair Huxford mentioned, there will be an opportunity for public comment following this staff presentation. Then it'll move on to commission discussion and deliberation, and then a potential recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council. So this is a type 6 legislative land use application, requires a public hearing before the Planning Commission, who then makes a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council then acts upon the Planning Commission's recommendation. So the City Council public hearing is scheduled for October 22nd. And so the public is welcome to attend that meeting as well. And that will be in the same room here at 6 o'clock on October 22nd. There will also be a Zoom component for that meeting. So just a very high level for those of you that are new to this. So this is not a new process. This isn't something that just came out of nowhere. The city has been working on developing this plan over the last 12 to 18 months. The Planning Commission has really been the workhorse on that, reviewing, holding 10 different work sessions to review and provide feedback on all the different individual elements or chapters of the plan. So parks and recreation, capital facilities, public services, land use, housing, environment, economic development. There's an introductory element as well. City Council has also held several work sessions. Kind of the primary focus of last meeting from the public was on the proposed map amendments. And so on those, there were several work sessions specifically dedicated to those map amendments. They were first introduced way back in February, and then over the summer held a series of work sessions to kind of refine those, to get initial feedback from the Planning Commission and the City Council. So just as far as the plan, so a draft of the plan, a public review draft was issued on July 26th. We solicited public comments, took those all the way through. Really, we continue to take comments on the plan, but incorporated comments that were provided by early September, incorporated those into an updated public hearing of the draft. And so that is what is included as attachment 4 within the packet from October 2nd. We also received a number of comments from different state agencies, primarily. So agencies such as the Department of Commerce, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Natural Resources. And so we incorporated their comments into the updated public hearing draft as well. And so that's reflected in attachment 4. It's shown as track changes. We wanted to show the work that's happened since that July 26th draft was issued. When this is forwarded on to the City Council for their public hearing, following a recommendation from the Planning Commission, that will be a clean version of the document for them to review. So as mentioned, we did get a lot of feedback back. Seems like a long time ago. It was just last week. But we had 17 people provide comments in person. We had several more people than that in the audience, but that was the number of people that provided public testimony. There were a range of concerns such as potential impacts on property taxes, the general pace of growth, feared use of either eminent domain or the city knocking down existing developments, which this is not part of the comprehensive plan. The city has no plans for that, has not worked with any specific developers. We're basically setting the land use framework for how the city can accommodate its projected growth over the next 20 years. Displacement is a major concern, and we understand that, and that has been a major focus of the housing element. Discussion of some map errors on some of the maps that were developed as part of the industrial analysis from last year. General thoughts about needing more sidewalks, and then some concerns about specific rezones. So at the conclusion of that meeting, the public hearing was continued to this evening. The public comment portion was left open, so there is the opportunity to provide additional comments tonight. So just a little bit about the materials in tonight's package. So attachment 7, in response to some of the feedback that we received last week and some of the concerns that we heard, staff worked on developing a frequently asked questions document, which was attachment 7 in the packet, to address things like, is the city planning on using eminent domain? Are there specific development proposals on any of these sites? Wanted to address some of those comments and concerns. So happy to address any questions on that as we get into the discussion and deliberation. Attachment 8 included written comments received following the September 27th publication of last week's meeting packet. And then we further supplemented the packet with additional hard copies of materials. So we received a couple additional public comments that we wanted to make sure that the Planning Commission had access to. Then attachment 10, we just cleaned up the 6-year and the 20-year capital improvement plans. So wanted that to be reflected at least in hard copies so that the Planning Commission could at least consider those as part of their recommendation. So at the conclusion of this, following public comment and following discussion and deliberation, the commission will be asked to make a recommendation. So staff did want to address or to pose a couple of questions specifically as the commission goes through their discussion and deliberation, want to focus on any proposed revisions to the narrative, the graphics, the goals, the policies, basically anything that's included with the comprehensive plan. And then if there are any specific revisions to the map amendments. So again, there is the plan, then there's a future land use map, which is included within the land use element. And then as part of this, the city is proposing some concurrent rezones to go along with those amendments to the land use map. And so wanted to make sure that we just discuss those. I would assume that we'll get some additional comments on those tonight. So those are kind of the main issues for discussion tonight. I did want to point out a couple of the map amendments that were discussed at last week's meeting and that we got specific comments on. So attachment 9 includes some correspondence from property owners that are covered by map amendment RC2, which is kind of at the western end of 20th Street Southeast as you get close to the trestle. The city had proposed to rezone that from mixed use neighborhood to multifamily residential. It would result in a little bit of an increase in zone capacity to help us to meet our growth targets, but in kind of working through the numbers and then getting feedback from the property owners that they've begun to do some site planning. And we're hoping to continue to utilize that mixed use zoning to have a project that includes residential and commercial. Staff is comfortable either moving forward with the rezone to multifamily residential, but is also comfortable with maintaining that mixed use neighborhood zoning. We can still meet our projected growth targets at those lower income levels. So that was one of them. We then just last night, and that's included in attachment 9 as well, got correspondence from a separate property owner on the north side of 20th Street Southeast, just east of 91st Avenue Southeast. This is not an area that's proposed for a rezone or for a land use map amendment. When the city went through its sub-area planning process for 20th Street back in 2012, It continued to be envisioned in that area to maintain the kind of the single family residential neighborhood and character of that area. We had not proposed any changes to that, but wanted to make the commission aware that there was a specific request. If they were to consider this, we wouldn't advise doing, say, a spot rezone of just the one parcel. If the commission feels like it would be warranted to examine potentially applying high density residential zoning to the north side of 20th in a larger area. That is something that can be discussed. That wasn't analyzed within the SEPA threshold determination or within the land capacity analysis. So we would need to make some modifications to both of those documents to make sure that both the potential housing impacts and then the potential environmental impacts are adequately addressed as part of those documents. I would also note that the applicant would be able to apply for map amendments, not as part of this periodic update, but as part of a future annual docketing process if they wanted to have that considered in 2025 or beyond. And then just a summary, attachments 5 and 6 in the October 2nd packet include the land use map and then the zoning map. So just wanted to call everyone's attention to that. As mentioned, a lot of the map amendments are more housekeeping in nature, basically just wanting to provide either public, semi-public zoning to city-owned or other properties that are owned by other public agencies that have either current residential or commercial designations. So just providing that public or semi-public zoning designation. There are a few that are specifically intended to provide increased residential and employment capacity to help the city meet its projected deficit of about 1,100 jobs by 2044. And then also its projected deficit of housing units affordable at or below 80% of area median income. So those are incorporated into the proposed map amendments. And then we did provide a story map, basically an online map that provides a little bit more context on each of the individual map amendment proposals. So just kind of a quick reminder on the process. This is a type 6 land use application. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation following this public hearing. Tonight is the continuation of that. The October 2nd staff report had noted that the proposal meets the approval criteria for comprehensive plan amendments that are included in the municipal code. Sorry, this last bullet point was from last week, but basically the reason that we continued the meeting onto this week is we wanted to make sure that there was adequate opportunity for public comment. We had gotten the packet out pretty late and didn't feel like 5 days was enough time for everyone to be able to process all of this complex information. So that's why the meeting was continued to this evening. So staff's recommendation, following the additional public comment that will be accepted tonight, would be for the commission to discuss and deliberate on the proposed plan and map amendments, identify any desired revisions, and then make that recommendation to City Council. The City Council would then hold their public hearing to consider the commission's recommendation. Between this hearing, if there is a recommendation made, and that October 22nd meeting, staff would basically accept the track changes, kind of clean up some of the formatting errors, some of the grammatical areas that are still in there, basically non-substantive edits that would be considered more Scrivener's errors, just basically providing consistent formatting. And that would be then presented to the City Council at their October 22nd public hearing. And there would be an additional opportunity for public comment at that meeting and in advance of that meeting. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions before we move on to the public comment portion.
So I'm glad that that there was some that this was brought up about the changing from multi-use to residential. In my review of the map, I did not notice that there was any changes like that, and so it makes me curious. And by the way, I totally agree with what the owner is hoping is to keep it as multi-use, and which makes me curious. Are there other places on the map that were switched from multi-use to residential?
I don't think we have some that were proposed here on Grade Road from Planned Business District, which is sort of a mixed use designation. It's different. It's kind of a very unique zoning designation that never was really very easy to implement. And that's why we propose getting rid of it and rezoning that area to multifamily residential. Kind of the major component of that, at least for the private portion of that, already has an approved land use application that was residential in nature. So it was consistent with that.
Yeah.
But Jill, I don't think, did we have any additional mixed use?
We had the Hartford Court.
Jill, if you would be able to speak into the mic, please.
I can. We have the Senior Manor rezone and the Hartford Court rezone that were also existing MUN zoned that are going to MFR.
Okay. But those are already being used as residential.
Correct.
Okay. So yeah, I just would hate for anyone who has invested in a property, as was pointed out by this owner, with the intent of making it multi-use or commercial, or having commercial uses for it, to have that switched on them. So I would just ask that we not make that mistake anywhere else in the city. And in that one place on Grade Road, if you could make sure that that owner is either aware or is okay with that change.
Okay.
I will comment.
Any other comments or questions from the commission at this point?
Just a quick procedural piece. At our last meeting, we had quite a number of questions from interested members of the public. Were we able to, or was the department able to carve out some time and respond to the questions and some of their concerns?
Yeah, so that was the intent of the FAQ, was to really focus on the questions that were raised. There were questions about displacement, question about this, if the city had any plans where any of these map amendments were proposed. Anyone that signed in and provided their email address on that sign-in sheet, we then mailed that FAQ out, as well as the rest of the meeting packet. So that was sent last Friday. So hopefully some of the members of the public that attended that meeting and had questions and provided comments. I didn't get any follow-up questions by email. I got a couple of additional phone calls, but hopefully people were able to review and process that information.
Great, thanks.
Any others? Okay, hearing none. I am going to ask again if there's anybody who wants to make public comment that has not filled out this sheet that's right here on this podium. If you would come up and do so, I'm going to go grab that piece of paper and start calling people. But again, we want to make sure that you have time to discuss issues that are on top of mind. If they are new to the discussion, they are not on the frequently asked questions response, and weren't addressed in the past meeting, this would be your opportunity, your name, your address in 3 minutes. If there's something that you want to reiterate, please do. I'll allow a minute each. And know that this is not a back and forth. It seems awkward, but when you ask a question at the podium, we can't answer at that point, but rest assured that the Planning Commission and staff are taking notes. And afterwards, when we have our discussion, many of those questions get addressed. So just please know that we're not being rude in ignoring you. With that, I'll go grab this with no one else needing to speak, correct? Gentlemen, welcome. Is your name on it?
My concern, of course, is for the current one, which is where I live. And that we just answered it by saying.
Arrangement is coming to you.
All right.
So name and address, please.
I live at 1603 East on Lakeshore Drive. I'm just waiting for them to.
It's all 3 minutes.
Okay, I don't understand. I'm new to this area. And my question is, what happened to the maintenance people? And to request, I requested some work orders done to my apartment, and they have not shown up lately. And what happened to the maintenance people? That's my question right there.
Thank you. And again, we can't answer you, so that seems like you're asking a question we're ignoring, but I think we can circle back with that one.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Mark Summers and Bryce Seek on deck. Mark, 3 minutes.
Good evening. I wanted to make a quick or short comment before the meeting gets going. I was here last week and we had quite a turnout, and like over 50, and we had maybe 20 online. So it was a pretty big meeting last week, and I didn't jump up to comment. So today I'm going to start off wanting to give thanks to the members of the commission and for the work you do and the commitment you make is really impressive. And the staff too, of course, what you add to this process. I started dropping by, I'm retired, so I can come and go when I want. So back in July last year, when this was starting, and we had the table, the look on your face was like, well, this is going to be a lot of work to do for a long time. And it is. It can be very complicated and hard to follow, but I'm really happy and impressed with the work that you've done. And we'll be shortly presenting to the council, and we'll move on again with that report. So thank you all for the work that you do.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Summers. I was corrected earlier in the meeting. It is a 20-year plan. It only seems like 10 years. So thank you. Bryce.
I see, and my wife and I reside at 2031 71st Avenue Southeast. And we are currently building our retirement home at 2109 71st Avenue Southeast in the Caballero Hill area, which is going to be rezoned, I guess. Please bear with me. It could take me an extra minute to get through this. I typed it all out. I pared it down as much as I could, but we're right in the heart of your proposed rezoning from single-family residence 4 to multi-family residence 30 or 40 per acre. We don't know what that exactly, how many units could potentially be built next to us under the new proposed zoning. We've lived here for 25 years, and when we bought, we were in the county. We knew we were in the GMA area. We were aware that when sewer and water were brought to the area, that the area could be developed at 4 homes per acre. Never in our wildest dreams did we anticipate ending up with a 4-story mid-rise apartment complex next door. Last year, I attended the October 2023 open house at Caballero Mid-High, and citing your own PowerPoint comprehensive plan update open house presentation, the area I'm speaking about was only proposed to change from R4 to R6. Nowhere was it proposed to become multifamily housing. Why would we think that we needed to attend any more meetings? Your February 21st meeting also reiterated that it was just going to be R4 to R6. Well, I know you've done your legal due diligence. The public notification process has been seriously lacking, as attested to by the October 2nd meeting, when one of the commission members repeatedly stated how surprised they were by the large turnout. This large turnout was a direct result of the proper notification to the directly affected property owners by way of posted street signs and personal mail notification. He also cited Aquafest and Harvest Market as a means of distributing information, but those events are not always able to be attended by homeowners, and when they are, it is for pleasure and not as a format we seek for receiving legal information. I realize that this wouldn't happen tomorrow, but the lack of infrastructure to support multifamily housing is of great concern, as the city has done little to support the residents currently living here. 71st Avenue Southeast is a dead-end road that is 16 feet wide and becomes even narrower in the spring and summer when the blackberries and tall grass encroach on the roadway. Two vehicles cannot pass each other in the opposite direction without one pulling off to the side to allow the other to pass. This is supposed to be a two-way road. The first property, as you enter from the county to the city, has become a repository for junk cars, used concrete, and asphalt. Before we were annexed, the county automatically cleaned out the ditches and mowed the side grass and kept the blackberries cut back twice a year, as they still do on 26th Street Southeast. But now the burden is on one of us or our neighbors to contact Public Works every year and beg them to come out. And if they do, it's only once a summer.
And Mr.
What we were promised as a reason to incorporate
Up.
and what we have received all these years since gives us no reason to trust that it would improve if rezoned to MFR. Once incorporated from Snohomish County to the city of Lake Stevens, not only did our taxes go up like additional utility taxes, but services such as street sweeping promised by the city in 2010 as one reason to annex decreased. If
Mr.
the
Seek,
PUD just installs
Mr.
sewer and
Seek,
water,
to be respectful to everybody else that is going to speak tonight, do we have a
I've got about
copy?
one paragraph left.
I would be happy to hear it.
Okay. If the PUD just installs sewer and water, which is now supplied by the city of Everett, it will allow for an R6 zone to be implemented and for you to help meet the state mandate of 2 homes and ADUs per single family lot and increase the housing capacity while still remaining a single family neighborhood. Anyway, please reconsider your placement of MFR. This will be followed up by an email with much more detail in it.
You just answered my question. Thank you so much. Make it public record.
Yes.
Thank you. I told Renee that I would give her an opportunity to get ready, and now I'm going to call her up, followed by Dina Williams. Renee, 3 minutes. Thank you.
I have a lot to say too, but I'll make it short. My name is Renee Bond. My address is 2314 Hartford. I'm the brick house that for some reason the developer showed up in my driveway the day after the meeting in, I think it was 2019, said the mayor had given my driveway to him because after the mayor had told us the day before that there was only one unit that could be built in the field, the wetlands that is sod. I also have problems with the ditches and the stickers. I have fish that are dying in the culvert in back of my, or can't get through to the culvert that runs under the road on Hartford. I mean, it's pretty alarming to watch fish die because nobody from the city will come out and clean out their side of the ditch. It's really bad. Anyway, you guys have been doing this for 18 months and I'm shocked and I feel embarrassed and I was so naive to how many people last week had legitimate complaints and problems. I think that we need to address some of their concerns before you guys start talking about building up more developments. When I called the planning department, I was talking to someone out there in town and they said, he goes, we're shocked that you guys have built so much out here. You guys have exceeded every other little community around in your area. They're not concerned. We shouldn't be concerned what's going to happen. I mean, I understand that they might want some kind of plan, but we need to address all the people's problems or else, I mean, a lot of us aren't even going to be around in 24 years or 20 years, unfortunately. I don't understand. Is anybody made any plans for any sidewalks for these people that are having problems? Or has anybody worried about the lady that couldn't get her car around the roundabouts? That thing at Frontier Village is just an embarrassment. People ask me, it's like, how do you drive around here? In front of Walgreens is even worse. It's like, I've never seen anything like it. It goes on and on and on. And it's like, can somebody tell me something that the council and the mayor has done that has worked out? Because I don't see anything.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you so much. Dina Williams, followed by Sally Jo Sebring. Dina? Yes.
Hi there. My name is Dina Williams, and I live at 12405 2nd Street Southeast in Lake Stevens. I'm here representing my sister, Shelley Sanders, who lives at 2206 Hartford Drive. We're a couple doors down from Renee, who just spoke. We both attended last week's meeting on October 2nd regarding the Planning Commission's public hearing on the 2024 Comprehensive Plan. I'm an average resident of Lake Stevens. I pay my taxes, I support my community, and I generally watch from the periphery when my government, city council, and its members, volunteers or elected, inform the community of proposed land use changes. We understand the folks in Olympia have decided what the future of Lake Stevens needs. My understanding is that this panel I'm speaking to now is to relay these changes in a straightforward manner for the residents to understand the reasons why these changes are happening and how it will affect us. The concerns I have are focused on the area of Hartford Drive. The proposed plan is suggesting that this area will be rezoned into a buildable business/commercial area. Here's the interesting part. This area has been deemed a protected wildlife wetland area and, more alarmingly, a part of the high liquefaction susceptibility area that has been designated by the PSRC, the Puget Sound Regional Council. This information has been provided by this council. Excuse me. Pardon me, I lost my spot here, and can be found within the multitude of pages that are provided by the panel of the project website that shows the documents, charts, and files. I waded through all of that and found this stuff in here. It is in there. I'm going to try to clarify what I found on the site. In the event of an earthquake, this area of Hartford Drive is highly likely to have the soil literally liquefy. Building on these areas is a no-no. Now, this exact area has been brought to the attention of Shannon Ferrant. She's the surface water manager of the city of Lake Stevens, Ariana Winkler from the Snohomish Conservation District, and April Rhodes, who is the program manager of Beavers Northwest. Did I just forget to mention that there are beavers right here on there, okay? They are a protected species. We've contacted these people trying to help get them to put in a neat little dam, whatever would have you. Unfortunately, the dam that the beavers have created, the lack of city going in and helping with this has created a flooding situation for the homeowners. And ultimately, when there is a huge, give me one more moment, I promise.
Thank you, Dina.
Basically, for the last 2 years, I've been in contact with these agencies with little help and zero insight of how to resolve the problem. We've been told it's the city's problem, it's the individual homeowner's problem, or it's the county's problem. Meanwhile, my sister now has a swamp for a backyard, but I digress. There's a pattern emerging here where multiple inquiries over multiple years to multiple state, city, and county agencies have made a muddled mess. This has resulted in residents and business owners feeling unsure about this zoning proposal, as it seems to lack the proper evidence that a buildable area is even possible. I'll say it again, there's a lack of transparency, honesty, and easily understood communication. I propose that in the future, let's start by sending out more simplified postcards, more simplified. Let's have an open and honest question and honor session, question and answer session where the answers provided are not just mere references to a mountain of information available on the website. And let's see better communication between state, county, and city entities.
And-
My sincere hope is that my words and the words of my fellow Lake Stevens community members do not fall on deaf ears or get swept under another rezoning proposal. We are all part of this little area of the world and deserve a clear and concise plan for the future growth that is inevitably coming.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Thank you to the community members present for choosing to be here this evening, and the City of Lake Stevens Planning and Community Development volunteers for your time.
Thank you. Sally Jo Sebring.
Sally Jo Sebring, 1023 99th Avenue Southeast. I'm going to be really brief. So this is about the multifamily residential being proposed at the end of 99th near 20th, north of 20th, southeast. So the capital project for that section of 99th to have sidewalks is somewhere between 2030 and 2044. But the plan is to rezone to multifamily residential right now. The ID number is, the project number is CP 1505. I would ask you to encourage the council to move that project into the 6-year plan. If you're going to put a bunch of apartments, people should be able to walk on a sidewalk all the way to 20th. And that CP 1505 is actually all the way from 11th Southeast to 20th. I'm just saying from 15th to 20th. Actually, it's all the way to South Lake Stevens, I think. From 15th before the next 6 years. And 5, which is, like I said last week, I don't understand why we're building a multi-use path from Highway 9 to sidewalks for developments when I don't think we really want to encourage people to ride their bikes and walk across the roundabout at Costco. I mean, that doesn't really make sense to me. So anyhow, I would encourage, that's in the 6-year capital facilities plan. I would encourage us to move at least part of the 99th. So there's from 15th to 20th, there's sidewalks when soon after those, if the apartments get built. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone else in the room that would like to speak from the podium? Hearing none. Do we have anyone online that has raised their hand? Oh, yes, ma'am. Your name, please, and address. Oh, sir, we changed on me. Sir, if you would like to join us at the podium, please, your name and address.
I don't live in Lake Stevens. We own property in Lake Stevens. So John Corder, 8005 South Lake Stevens Road. That's where I live. The property address we have is, Kristen? No. Oh. David actually wouldn't address the 9119 20th Street Southeast. So David addressed this earlier. We the property is around 0.94 acres. It's in a kind of residential area, which is really kind of nice because the kids play in the street. This property we have is kind of on the corner of 91st and 20th. And it's very unique where we'd like to have access from 20th and have a driveway, road go through and get off on 91st. So it's kind of a one-off property where we don't want to have any, we want to increase the zoning to make it profitable because we can't basically build. You can do 5 houses, done the numbers, we can't make it work. We can't, it's not a very desirable piece of property. It's allowed. So we will need to increase the density and basically make rentals. So anyway, but we don't want to affect the existing neighborhood. It's a nice cul-de-sac. It's for families. And we think the property is unique enough to where it can be isolated and have the density increased. That's it.
Thank you so much. Do we have anybody online that has raised their hand?
Just someone asking for the FAQs to be emailed to them.
Okay. Again, last call. Is there anybody who would like to address the Planning Commission and staff? Thank you for your comments this evening. Commissioners, if we are feeling like our public comment has been sufficient, that no one else is wanting to add, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? When we close the public comment, then we can have questions to the audience if we choose. So I feel very assured that you will be having a moment where you can ask us a question. Are you okay? Can we close the public comment? All right, thank you. I'm sorry, we have to do things in a certain order and make it official. So I appreciate your time. Thank you. So we had a motion, we had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so now the public comment portion is closed. We are going to have a discussion. We are going to ask staff some questions, and we may very well ask some of the questions of the audience here and bring up some of the comments that were made, both in writing and last week. So with that, let me turn it over to my fellow conditioners. Commissioners. Yes, Commissioner Davis.
I had a question that I'm hoping that Senior Planner Levitan can address because it's come up at both of the meetings and I think it's something that's on top of mind for a lot of people. And it's the idea of critical, sensitive environmental areas. And it just came up tonight. And so I was hoping that you could address the idea of any development that would be proposed would have to cross the threshold of not impacting the environment negatively, can you address that? There are critical area developmental rules that would have to be addressed in any development.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to speak to that. So yeah, the city has an adopted critical areas ordinance in chapter 1488 of the municipal code. And so that would apply under say you had a single family residential zone property or you had a commercial zone property and it was proposed for something new. All of that ordinance would still apply. It would still be subject to all of the critical areas regulations. There would need to be a site-specific critical areas study submitted to demonstrate whether there are steep slopes, whether there are wetlands, streams, liquefaction areas, critical aquifer recharge areas. Basically would need to demonstrate compliance. And so when the city looks at buildable capacity and it utilizes things such as the Snohomish County Buildable Lands Report, there are areas, just because we rezone a piece of land doesn't mean that we assume that the entire piece is going to be redevelopable or even developable at all. That's factored in to the Buildable Lands Report and into the projected capacity for those. So on certain lands, it might make sense to apply a higher density zoning, realizing that just a very small portion of that site can be developed. So there are a lot of variables on this without going into particular, specific properties. It's hard to speak in detail, but at the high level, yes, the critical areas ordinance still applies. They would still need to demonstrate compliance with it regardless of the zoning designation.
So if you were to say there's a wetland area and it's zoned MFR, that does not mean that it will ever be MFR. It means the critical area takes precedence over any kind of zoning, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, there's some, if they can demonstrate that they can provide adequate mitigation the same way that they could demonstrate for single family residential, they'd be able to potentially build, but ultimately they need to demonstrate compliance with the city's code, which implements the comprehensive plan. So yeah, and it's similar to, an area, say at the west end of 20th in the trestle, near the trestle. If it were to be rezoned to multifamily residential, there's no guarantee, obviously, that multifamily residential would be built. It would obviously be up to individual property owners. And they would need to be able to provide adequate access. They would need to demonstrate compliance with critical areas regulations. They would need to demonstrate concurrency between capital facilities and public services and the projected development on the site. So there are a lot of variables at the site-specific level.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Just had, one of the questions that came up, or one of the comments that came up was with regard to basic connectivity, sidewalks, paths and all that. And in attachment 10, we talk about, the 20-year capital improvement plan. I guess my question is, how flexible is that list? Is it something that's controlled by council? Is it controlled by staff? And is it something that can be, we'll say, resorted or reprioritized based on the nature of development kind of as that develops organically?
It can be. So the CIP is something that for those of you that have been on planning commission for more than, a few years or more, that tends to be part of the annual docket. We update that pretty much every year because the Public Works Department, the Parks Department, they're constantly updating that plan. The 6-year is updated, they're required to update that 6-year plan annually. And so we often then make concurrent updates to the 20-year plan just to make sure that there's consistency between the two. Obviously, if something's going to be on the 6-year plan, it also needs not on their plan and you to the sign that, but needs to be reflected on the 20-year plan as well. So we capitalities element, it's typically just 1 and 9.2 is often the only updates we make to that element on an annual basis. But we often, that often is pretty much the only element that gets updated unless we have other, say, in the 2023 docket, there were some map amendments as well. But, the capital facilities element, specifically those two tables have been updated pretty much on an annual basis for, the last 5 to 10 years at least.
Additional questions?
So I mentioned this earlier, and I guess I should make it more formal. I'd like to make a motion that these parcels that were moved from MUN to MFR that are designated in this email, that we keep them as MUN. Can we have that as a motion?
Do you mind
Okay,
tabling that motion?
sure.
And let's do all of our motions at one time.
Sounds good.
So noted that you have made that motion, but let's sit there for a second.
Okay.
Anything else?
To address another one of the comments, when it comes to individual parcels, this is the comp plan is looking at broad strokes. And when it comes to individual parcels that where the landowners desiring to convert from one zone to another, that's not that just because we're making this comp plan doesn't mean that can't happen in the future. And those individual cases can be brought as far as another process on the annual docket, correct?
That's correct. And just to clarify, so if something needs both a land use map amendment, say it's got a land use designation of medium density residential and a zoning designation of R6, and they wanted to change the zoning to high density residential, they would need to do both a zoning map amendment and a land use map amendment. And once you do if you're required to do a land use map amendment, you can only do that through the annual docket. So you would have to, at the beginning of the year, propose that. It would have to be ratified by the city council to at least be explored following a public hearing and recommendation from the planning commission. If you have the appropriate land use designation and you just need a rezone, you can do that pretty much anytime during the year. And that's a standalone application. If you don't need a land use map amendment, you can pretty much do it whenever. If you need a land use map amendment, you can only do it through that annual docketing process.
So, and to get specific with the quarters, would that be part of that that process that you just mentioned?
Yeah, that would require, I looked at it just to make sure because they're along that stretch, I can't remember, is it R6 or RE12 currently? I think I looked at it though, and it had a median land use designation. In order to get to high density residential zoning, you need to have a high density residential land use designation. So they would need that land use map amendment. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it has the MDR.
So there's a process in place and they can go ahead and go through that process, right?
That would be, and I mean, if there were, say, concerns, we've heard concerns about, from at least one property owner that, lives at the western terminus of 20th and doesn't feel like that area is appropriate. If the planning commission were to agree with that and say, yeah, that doesn't make sense to do high density residential there. We do have our growth targets that are allocated by the state. We would need to find that additional multifamily residential capacity someplace else. So if you were to make a recommendation that not be rezoned to MFR, we would need to find additional capacity elsewhere. Whether that's somewhere else along 20th, whether that's somewhere else in the city. Basically, we would need to then update our land capacity analysis to remove those 20th Street parcels near the trestle and to look at other areas and to make sure that we're providing adequate zone capacity to provide potential housing units that are affordable, that could be affordable at 0 to 80% of AMI, which need to be apartments or condos per the state guidance. We heard discussions about, let's just build duplexes and have 2 ADUs. Unfortunately, within the central Puget Sound region, those don't count towards meeting housing supply at or below 80% of AMI, which is where the majority of our documented need is that we don't have adequate capacity for. So if we were able to do that in other parts of the state, you can use ADUs, but you're specifically not allowed to do that within Puget Sound because the assumption is that the housing costs are higher and that they wouldn't be affordable at below 80% of AMI.
And with regard to Ms. Sebring's comments about existing apartments that are designated R4, R6, 812, et cetera, are those zoning designations, do those need to be fixed, do you believe?
No, so they wouldn't be in it. So if there were kind of like small pockets or like smaller projects that say had an existing, small courtyard apartment, but they were zoned R4, those are counted towards our existing supply. So then and I did provide a response to Ms. Sebring, I didn't include it. I just included her initial comments. I didn't want to have all the back and forth on all the I have reached back out to most of the people that have provided comments. So just didn't want their kind of main questions and concerns to be drowned out by all of my inane chattering in my response, in my email responses. And so, we do get credit for all of that multifamily residential supply, even if it's not in an existing multifamily residential zone, and that's reflected in our growth targets.
So why wouldn't we just go ahead and designate those as MFR if they're already MFR, if they're already being used in that way?
We could, and I didn't, get into the specifics or look at the ones that it was kind of addressed kind of more conceptually, or she did give a couple of those. So that is something that we could do. So yeah, I mean, if the commission would like to if we're doing these housekeeping map amendments and they'd like to do that, it wouldn't necessarily increase zone capacity because there's already multifamily residential there. But if you'd like to recommend that those receive multifamily, that's something that we can do.
If anything, we're doing a lot of cleanup and might as well clean up everything. So that's what I would propose. But anyway, we can make those motions at the time. Yeah, that's
And
all.
you're keeping notes. You had some good comments there. Thank you so much. For the record, let me welcome Chair Davis. We appreciate you joining us. Thanks for doing double duty and being everywhere in our city in one night. Appreciate that. Commissioner Packard.
I don't have anything to say.
Okay. I have a couple questions, a couple of which were just brought up by Commissioner Morton. I appreciate that. Specific to Hartford And again, full disclosure, because I need to make sure that I say this, I own property in Hartford. My husband and I own a business on Hartford Drive. So I'm very familiar with the area, with the topography and with the limitations that it has when it comes to the environment. I'm also very aware that we don't have any facilities down there. It's a long way for sewer to get in that area. It is a long way for sidewalks to get to that area. In looking at the broader scope, and I'm asking staff this question, again, we're rezoning it not because somebody specifically is planning on building there or that we have a vision to build there. It is making it cohesive with the properties surrounding that area, correct?
Yeah, so that's a big part of it. And just remember that this is a 20-year planning horizon. So it seems if there aren't services or utilities available, we did go through kind of industrial planning analysis last year. It wasn't a formal sub-area planning effort, but the Hartford area now, kind of renamed Lake Stevens Industrial Center to kind of combine the two industrial areas, is envisioned to provide a lot of the city's employment capacity. There's a long road ahead to be able to accommodate some of that employment growth, basically utilities, critical areas. There are some encumbrances and some roadblocks to getting there. So it will take a lot of future work to do that. But yeah, to answer your question, that kind of is reflected in the planning process.
And then the overlay of the Department of Ecology, the department that I love. Kidding. Department of Ecology has a say in every single project that goes on this city, as small or as big as it is. And if there is something on that property that would be prohibitive, such as an endangered species or a type of plant, Department of Ecology, in my opinion, has something to say about that and supersedes city. Is that correct?
So I mean, if there are at either the state or the federal level, so either the Department of Ecology at the state level or Environmental Protection Agency or other relevant federal agency, if there are federal, threatened or protected species, so yeah, there would be protections at those state and federal levels that we would need to demonstrate compliance with.
Okay. I don't think, well, I won't get into beavers because they just ate all of my hedge trees. So we'll let that one go. A little mad at the beavers. Did I have any other questions before we turn time over to you, Chair Davis? Oh, I did want to mention, and he left, but our neighbor Tom Dodd, who addressed us originally this evening, I suspect that his question was directed at the actual facility and not at Public Works. So when I see him tomorrow going down the street, and I see him every day, I will make sure that that is something that he brings up with the management of his complex rather than through Planning Commission, as we have, again, we have no control over maintenance in that building.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, my apologies for not being here. It's only once my son got Student of the Month at his middle school, so had to be there for that. We're on comments from the board, correct?
This is all on the board. So
Yeah.
we have closed the public comment and we are addressing any of the questions that we have to each other and to staff. And then we've got just a quick update. There are some things that came this evening that we will be making some motions on momentarily.
Okay.
But right now, we've each had a moment to speak. And if there's anything from the last meeting or anything from the paperwork that you'd like to address.
It really, the big thing for me is to see what the process might be going forward to ensure that the postcards and communication from the city, this may have been brought up earlier, my apologies, that we make sure that we have this in as lay terms as possible. The hyperlink that's provided, there's a lot of legalese and wonky language in that really can confuse residents. We're hearing the last meeting, it was the same concern over and over and over again. So just moving forward to make sure that the city has a plan in place for proper communication, and that perhaps there's like a citizen advocate that is appointed with the city to be that direct point person that has those talking points down, that knows how to properly communicate it from the most well-versed member that comes to city commission and city council meetings on a regular basis, to somebody that's just getting this for the first time and goes to the catastrophizing, thinking that their home is going to be, what's the term?
Torn down.
Torn down. Well, yes. So, I mean, my heart goes out to those residents and citizens here of Lake Stevens. And I know that was not at all the intention, but yeah, to make sure that we have a clear way to properly communicate this moving forward. And I'd love for the commission, I know this would take time, but for the commission to get kind of a draft of what this might look like in the future, so that we can make some recommendations and we can collaborate with the city to make sure that we do have some good communication. But again, that citizen advocate, I think it might be somebody that's already with the city that can help to field those questions and is prepared, has the the ability to deal with understandably citizens that are really alarmed at the time. So yeah, that was the biggest takeaway from the last meeting. Thank you.
I guess I would like to say that I do think the FAQ document is a great start, and maybe there's still a little bit more work and a few changes. But overall, I think it does a great job of answering what I think you're asking for. So.
And if the planning commission does have changes to the FAQ, please feel free to reach out to senior planner. Do you want to take the meeting from here,
Sure.
or do you want me to keep it on?
Well, you've been doing such a great job of
You haven't been here.
I haven't even been here. I'm just inferring by the smiles in the audience.
You don't know where I got. Is there, we'll tag team this. We're good at this. So are there any other questions that have not been posed? So we do have a couple motions. I tabled one earlier. We do have a couple motions, and then we have a responsibility this evening to make a decision as to whether or not we're going to pass this along, or if we're going to make amendments to this comp plan before we pass it along, for it to be city council's discussion next. So any other discussion for the greater good?
So are we going to have discussion about the final motion on whether or not to propose to the city? Are we going to
Yes.
talk about that before we ask for a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Right now? That's fine if it's now. I'm just asking.
There were a couple motions that were, we were starting. Let's start there and then have a discussion. Don't you feel fair?
Yeah.
To see where we are in the comp plan at that point, how we feel about it, and then have our discussion on it before 5.
So the motion that I was making?
Yeah, let's do them one at a time and
Yeah,
speak
sure.
into your mic, please.
So the motion I would make is that the parcels that are brought up in the email from Mr. Condi, that those remain MUN rather than being changed to MFR. And that all other changes like this, where it goes from MUN to MFR, are well communicated to those individual owners to make sure that they didn't already have plans to make commercial changes. I don't know if that's
Let's
valid.
do a motion
Okay,
and then a recommendation.
okay, let's do that. That's fine. I'm fine with that.
Okay, so the motion is that the parcels indicated in the
Condi email,
Conda email,
remain MUN.
MUN, and not move to MFR.
Yep.
So is there a second? I'll second that. Commissioner Davis seconds. All those in favor?
Can there be some discussion around that motion real quick? Sorry.
Sure.
Can we clarify? So those specific 5 properties are a subset of a larger plat. Is the motion for just those 5 properties or for that whole region, which has been designated to switch.
And hence my recommendation at the end, because I suspect that there's more than just these 5, and for those, there are maybe additional, for those additional.
There are, I would have to look at the map to see how many more there are. But we could do it either way. I mean, it could be just those 5 that they have, that they own or have control over. Or it could be that entire area that's proposed to go from MUN to MFR. City staff, because that's not a huge increase in capacity, city staff is comfortable with either. It might be a little bit cleaner just to maintain all of that as mixed use neighborhood.
I was just going to say that I tend to just have a preference personally for not making, when we're talking about the comprehensive plan, making decisions that are based on individual property owners and parcels, but more general because it's such an overarching plan. And then having the individual requests go through the annual docket. So my second of that was the idea of that area, not necessarily just specific.
Not the specific parcel.
Right.
So I do have a little bit of concern with just looking at the map with the number of properties there and cherry picking just several of them to convert and then remaining the others
What's that?
as is. My thought would be, is this something that can be tabled until the annual docket? At the year generally.
Well, it does keep landowners in limbo. Clarity is what we've been kind of aiming for during this process.
Well, I think where my concern is if we have a series of properties that are kind of making Swiss cheese out of another neighborhood that we're converting, then that might not be the best use of that entire area. I think we might have had an issue like that several years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we had one area zoned one way, surrounded by an area zoned another way, and we came back and had to do it again, had to fix what the planning commission had done.
So what is the general consensus? We started out, we went around the bend.
I have not seen the map showing this, and oh yeah, that'd be good to see. I don't really have an opinion about the other properties in the area, so I don't know.
So the pink is the existing multifamily residential, and then it's proposed to go to existing mixed use neighborhood and proposed to go to multifamily residential. So it looks like there's 1, 2, 3.
Oh, well, then I would move that.
Well, about 12 properties.
That whole area, because it's a contiguous chunk, and one property owner has brought this up. Maybe there are others in that area, and it's, yeah.
Well, so maintaining the status quo would be leaving it mixed use neighborhood zone. And then, so Commissioner Dewar, I'm hearing you say is you don't feel like a change should be made without, a deeper look at that
Deeper look at the
area.
entire
So perhaps
subset, yeah.
a recommendation, like if we decide what we're forwarding to council recommending, with the exception of that area, keep that at status quo until it can be added to the annual docket for a potential change where.
Yeah, I think that's
Is that
fair.
what you're saying?
Yeah, because I would be concerned, for example, if the properties down the middle there, are left out in the cold, and the ones on the sides are the ones that get a zoning adjustment.
So what is our motion?
Okay.
So just to be super clear, though, the property owners that wrote they're not asking for the change, they're asking for it to stay the same. So.
Well, and I think that this particular parcel invites conversations about some of the other proposed changes to multifamily. On Hartford, there's at 131st in Hartford, there's another multifamily residential, a zoning amendment there. Those are, I think of that because we're considering the change to the Centennial Trail. We're looking at these large conduits to come into the city, where should that come to fruition, that strikes me as a perfect place for mixed use. To, afford that, the retail component on the bottom floor. So, I'd like to have a broader conversation, honestly, about some of those zoning changes. Knowing though that, it seems to me that southwest Lake Stevens, both of those parcels, those areas, it seems like a no-brainer for those to remain MUN. Now, the one that's furthest west on 20th Street, what had that been previously zoned for? So not the pink parcel, the one to the west of it.
What is it zoned right now?
What is it currently zoned? Yes.
Yeah, so that's our R4.
R4. Okay.
And so as I noted, I can't remember if you were here when I was discussing this, we did hear from some, a resident of that area that had concerns about it. And I know there's been questions from others about the feasibility for high density residential. If, the planning commission would be able to factor that into its recommendation to not recommend that area for high density residential, there would need to be something built into the recommendation that it would need to be contingent on the city, whether you provide that direction tonight and identify some potential other areas for increased multifamily residential capacity to meet our growth targets, or whether it's something that is deferred or delegated to the city council, and that would probably require, some sort of continuation. We're obligated to open the public hearing on the 22nd, but may need to open the public hearing and do additional analysis, additional land capacity analysis to look for other areas to accommodate that additional multifamily residential zone capacity. So there's a couple different ways of doing it depending on how strongly you feel and if you have kind of specific prescriptive areas of the city that, you think would be more appropriate.
Do the comments that Ms. Sebring brought up and the infill comments that John alluded to, both in writing and in person this evening, do opportunities like that exist where seeking out what we already have and reallocating those? Could we do some of that work before we make the recommendation to council?
Ms. Sebring's, because those are existing units, especially the ones that say the park on 20th, like that site assumes no future residential growth just because there's so much improved value there. That has basically just been excluded from the buildable lands report because it was basically built in 2019 or whatever year that was built. So there's no assumed residential capacity on that site. So those 195 units are already factored in. They've been, our growth targets account for the fact that there's no projected future residential development on that site. The other ones, I'd have to look at the buildable lands. The existing supply is already factored in. I'd have to see if they assumed any additional capacity as infill development. The BLR, the buildable lands report, is usually pretty conservative if there is an existing multifamily residential development. Unless it's like on 1/4 of the site, it's not going to assume a whole lot of infill development potential. But I'd have to go back into the actual work that the county did to see if there is any additional capacity and if higher density zoning then would bump up that additional infill capacity. So that's something we'd probably have to do a little bit more research on. Wouldn't be comfortable just like telling you, oh yeah, you're going to be able to get there just through these additional
Mission
sites.
accomplished. No, I just, and I said this the last meeting too, we have to go up because we can't continue to go out. So I get it. But is there some massaging that can go on with what's already here to help reach some numbers so that we can lessen the difference of what we currently have versus what we are potentially proposing when rezones come into play?
Yeah, we were, in developing the recommendations, and there have been, some evolution to some of this over the last year, last 9 months, especially. probably would have to take a closer look. I don't think there's a whole lot of, extra capacity that we could just find and kind of, as you mentioned, massage the numbers a little bit. We probably would have to identify some areas, whether that's other parts of the city, if we think that it should be dispersed more beyond just the 20th Street corridor. We had identified some potential sites, say, I can't remember if I think it was Commissioner Morton that had brought up a site, I think just north of the Target, which probably would be pretty appropriate. But that, when you look at the demographics of that area, it is lower income. It's basically unsubsidized, unregulated, built-in affordable housing for Lake Stevens. And so we would have major displacement risks if we were to say upzone all of that to multifamily residential. And that would be a place where we would be concerned about displacement just because it's denser than this area. And then the residents that live there are generally lower income. And so we would be concerned about areas like that. We'd want to do a displacement analysis similar to what we did for some of the other areas.
I mean, I was here when we were talking about 20th, and that has been a long discussion. And I think that with, the bus systems and the sewer being there and all of that, the infrastructure is there. It makes sense. But I also want to be respectful of people that have made an investment in our community. And I bring this up every meeting, but if we already reside here, not that we should take precedent, but we're the ones that are already here. It's not those that we are building for. And I want to be sensitive when it comes to changing anything midstream for some of these people that are already our neighbors and friends.
And I would just note, we definitely have projected future housing needs, but if you look at the mismatch between our housing supply and especially in the rental market and the number of people that are not only housing cost burdened as far as spending more than 30% of their income towards housing and transportation, but that are extremely housing cost burdened and spending more than 50% towards rent and transportation and utilities. We have probably thousands of residents that are spending more on housing than they should be. And that's obviously common throughout the region. It's common throughout the United States and generally the world. But it's an issue for both existing residents and for future residents.
So for the edification of the commission, we are at a point where we need to give feedback to staff with or without a recommendation of what is currently put together so that they can continue to glean information and pass along to city council their findings. So how would we like to move forward with that?
Can we just finish this one amendment or one motion first?
Can I ask one?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't know where we are in the motion anymore.
So with regard to this mixed use neighborhood designation, am I clear that when you were giving your presentation and in the packet, it says that staff is confident that or comfortable with potentially excluding that from our recommendation because it wouldn't substantially impact our obligation to plan for the multifamily?
Yeah, when you look at the mixed use neighborhood development assumptions, or at least the development standards within, say, the municipal code, it assumes a minimum density of 15 units per acre. And there's nothing that would preclude it from being higher than that. It's hard to do a land capacity analysis on hypotheticals, but the delta between the pink area, the delta between going from mixed use neighborhood to multifamily residential as far as zone residential capacity is pretty small. Whereas the delta between obviously going from R4 to high density to multifamily residential adds a lot more units for a similar sized area. It's a little bit larger, but the lots are large. And that was part of it, is that, it's larger lots. It's not like completely built out like some of the other areas that are 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square foot lots. That did factor into, some of the process and some of the recommendations from staff on this, as far as why this area was, potentially proposed for high density residential, with the acknowledgement the trestle can be a disaster. It is a disaster. There's going to need to be all sorts of capital improvements, there would probably need to be a road that goes through there, better access on Cavallero, better access on 20th, or something that goes through the middle. But this is a 20-year plan, and, just evaluating it from a land capacity perspective and looking at potential improvements over a 20-year plan, city staff felt confident in proposing this and, including it in the staff recommendation for Planning Commission to consider in their recommendation to City Council. But again, that being said, if you'd like to focus on other areas, we need to get to a target. We need to create a certain number of new units of zone capacity. And again, this is zone capacity. Nobody has to build this. It's going to be up to the individual property owners, whether they sell, whether they don't sell, whether they build, whether they continue to build. Even if you go to multifamily residential, you can still build single family residential. It's a little bit different than, say, the portions in past, especially past dockets. We've had areas within the 20th Street Southeast corridor that had been rezoned to commercial. And we actually had one where, I think it was 2022, where we went back to residential because people basically couldn't build, and it was like not very feasible to do a small commercial development off of, say, 97th Drive Southeast, just east of Highway 9. And so we actually put that area back into residential because we had tried it. We did a 10-year check-in and it didn't make sense. And so we changed it back. And so, yeah, we obviously need something as part of the periodic update just so we get it certified, because Commerce is going to be looking very specifically at our land capacity analysis and make sure that we have adequate zone capacity. We would be able to then, through future annual dockets, to make additional changes. You still need to maintain compliance with the Growth Management Act. We couldn't just change everything back and downzone it, because Commerce and PSRC would not be very happy with that. And we probably would lose all future grant funding at the federal level, but for being out of compliance with the Growth Management Act. But yeah, there would be future things that we could do as part of the annual docket.
So as a result of the discussion, I could change my motion so that the entire area that's pink remain MUN rather than changing it to MFR.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
I guess I'll say I'm undecided.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, sorry to belabor this more, but yeah, I guess my general concern is that so while in this very specific instance with this 5 properties, agree with the idea that, hey, they invested, they intend to make our city better. I don't want to shoot that down, right? My only concern is that we're looking at a single request and how it affects the broader comprehensive plan. There may be another 20 of these type of requests that just haven't come out yet, right? And so how do we, and maybe it's more of a process question, is how do we look at each of them individually? Because it could blow this whole thing up and it could take us another 6 months to get through the comprehensive plan.
Actually, I don't think there's that many.
There may be not. That's all my concern is we're looking at one specific thing and having it influence the broader comprehensive plan.
This is a change that goes from a change of type from semi-commercial to purely residential. And that's why I asked earlier about that. But almost all the other changes, I assume, are just changing from one residential type to another residential type, and that doesn't affect property owners who don't want to change at all. Whereas this is an example of someone who had a plan and we're affecting them.
Understood. I'll use the gentleman here who already addressed us. If I thought I understood him, he is intending to build his retirement home, his dream home, and then there's going to be apartments. I see that as essentially the same thing, that he had a vision for his property and what his future would look like, and now it's different. So because he came, are we going to address his issue as well?
Changing zoning.
Understood. I'm just asking if looking at individual requests as part of our comprehensive plan is the right thing to do versus what I thought I heard you say a little bit was, hey, let's do this as what we think is the best thing for the city, and then we will address one-offs later.
So
But I understand that may be difficult, so.
No, I actually agree with you that, and I don't mean this is in conflict with what I said earlier about not making decisions at the comprehensive plan level based on individual parcels. I guess I should have said a little bit more of the context of this. For me, the way that it's currently, the land use designation fits with the 20th Street sub-area planning that we did. The idea of having walkability for commercial, the idea of the mixed use hubs for people to be able to walk to not use their cars or to ride their bikes up to access businesses or provide more employment. Because of the location of this, the idea of having not just those 5 parcels, but that the area. I'm kind of the mindset that I don't want to get on board with changes that are unnecessary changes. So creating more density is necessary because we're being required to do so by the state. This, to me, holding it at status quo fits better with the, not just the specific parcels that are addressed in the email, but the idea that we did planning on a larger sense for the sub area. And so this continues along with that planning. So that's kind of where I was coming from, because I actually really agree with you that this isn't the right process really for addressing individual parcel related requests.
So we had a motion, a second, a vote, and we are voting with the 5 of us in agreement with 1 abstaining from the decision will be how that vote is. And then the second half of that is, and I don't know if it's a motion or a request, that there be further discussion internally on what zones can be massaged, I keep using that word, to keep them as close to their current zoning as possible without doing a blanket swipe of all of the zoning that's there now. Perhaps there are some other smaller opportunities, to Commissioner Morton's point, that aren't specifically in this room or have reached out to us, but there might be some opportunities to find some of the places that can be either upzoned or downzoned to make it so that we reach our numbers without impacting existing residents.
That's a pretty complicated motion.
I know. I didn't say a motion though. I said a recommendation. I said a recommendation. I feel like that would be one that would satisfy those that are going to continue on with the public comment through the city council's portion of it, that this is fluid, it is being discussed, and that we're not saying today, we love everything, we're handing it over, they've got to vote on this. I think that there might still be some opportunity there. You look thrilled with that. Bill.
I'm just trying to think procedurally how we would factor that into a recommendation, and, staff can do some additional research. And if I think there would need to be some sort of motion where you basically directs that you're kind of kind of preliminarily including in your recommendation to change, just to clarify, we're talking about the area in yellow, correct?
Well,
Not necessarily.
no, not necessarily.
Not
that area.
necessarily.
What I was asking, what my recommendation was, in addition to the motion, was specifically for changes from MUN to MFR. Because that's not just a change in density, it's a change in type. And that was my concern. And so I just wanted to, I don't think we don't have time to go through and look at every single instance of that. You did summarize those earlier and stated that those are not that they should not be a concern. So if that's, and I trust you, so let's just.
So to
keep it that.
parlay off of that, so that's one recommendation. And then the second recommendation is to find any properties that might be not considered at this point under where they are, what they're coded as, whatever,
Mhm.
to be part of our housing requirement.
don't quite understand what that.
It goes back to the issue that was brought up by Ms. Seabright. Just
Oh,
if
oh,
there
yeah.
are, if there are housing opportunities that we have not included in our overall
Mm.
scope of
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if you forward a recommendation, with just the motion to maintain the mixed use neighborhood zoning for the area that's shown in pink, and that your recommendation say did include the area in yellow that's proposed to go to, that the R4 area to the west of that that's proposed to go to multifamily residential. I think staff could do some additional analysis and maybe provide that analysis to city council and then can relate planning commission's concerns and their desire to look for opportunities to mitigate, some of the proposed zoning changes with existing capacity that we can find. It's kind of hard to commit to that because we don't know what we're going to find.
And
So-
I think that we're all aware that we're asking for something in the last, inning here. But I also think that it's important, just in the interest of transparency, that it be that one more look before it goes before city council be, that be taken under consideration.
Yeah, so that's something, and Russ is not here this evening, and I'd want, probably the city attorney to weigh in just how we would even factor that in when we're doing our staff report for the city council and preparing an ordinance. I mean, it may be something where we just don't prepare the ordinance for the first public hearing and allow for additional public comment on the 22nd and just assume that we're going to need to continue that city council public hearing into November. And if we get into, when that second one would be, because typically they don't hold city council on election day, which would be their first meeting in November. And then, so it's just like trying to look at it. So I think it's something conceptually we can do. And I think we have general direction and the thought. And I totally get where several commissioners are coming from. I don't know how specific your motion would, I don't know if just your discussion and deliberation, if that can just be reflected in the minutes and in your recommendation. I think we can incorporate that into the recommendation letter that we typically provide with the ordinance. It's the planning commission recommendation letter is usually an exhibit to the ordinance to amend the comprehensive plan.
Would it derail procedurally, would it limit derailing because I know that Commerce needs this by the end of 2024, right?
They do. And I think we're, it may not seem like it, but we're actually in a lot better shape than a lot of cities who haven't even issued their 60-day notice. And so we're actually, we'd built this in, especially because this is budget season as well. And we knew that the city council, we didn't want to get to the end of November. And then if they had, budget issues that they were still dealing with, and you're having to have them have public hearings on two pretty meaty topics, both the comp plan and the budget. But that being said, there are, I think you get into November and then once you get past the middle of November, it kind of becomes pretty difficult to schedule things.
Would it be, so what I'm trying to do is balance I'm trying to think of a way to balance the clear need of the community. Thank you for being here, commenting, to be assured that this has really been thoroughly vetted as far as where all of it. But also it does have to get done by the end of the year. So is it an option for us to say, I'm just throwing this out there, for us to say, we're forwarding this to council with the two caveats that we recommend that they keep this pink zone MUN and that the city council take a look at whatever staff comes up with in terms of potential, that you guys take one more pass at it, but that it doesn't have to be so formalized that we do that and then the community can weigh in at the public hearing that the city council has?
I think, I think
Yeah.
that can be reflected in the recommendation letter, that it's not a formal motion, that it's basically, I'd probably recommend making a motion that, it's obviously not nearly as prescriptive as your motion, which is very clear and concise as far as you've approved a motion not to change the zoning from mixed use neighborhood to MFR. And that you're not even looking, that this came up, that there are a couple of areas, and I don't even think they need to be referenced, but you're basically directing staff in advance of the city council public hearing to look at other opportunities to provide the required zone capacity for multifamily residential that maybe wouldn't require changes from an R4 to an MFR, something.
So I will make the motion of what David just said. I think that's fair because I think that it makes it a lot clearer, but it also leaves it so that we aren't saying, it has to be done or would be done. We're simply saying that we are requesting of city staff that that be prioritized before this goes before vote with city council.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I think we can do that. And, depending on what the city council's reaction or what we find, I mean, we're obligated to at least open the public hearing on the 22nd because it's been duly noticed. It was included on the postcards. And all of that, but that doesn't mean that they obviously, similar to how you didn't make a recommendation at your first meeting and you continued the public hearing. It could be we do some additional analysis and we just recommend, opening the public hearing on the 22nd and continuing it. I'd want to get feedback, and I don't know, Christy, if you have general thoughts.
I do. My suggestion would be is to go with the recommendation that Planning Commission, based on testimony provided by the public, has a recommendation to direct the city staff to provide some further analysis between now and the first city council public hearing on the 22nd to see if we can provide any additional capacity existing within the city. And if so, that would be reflected to the staff report to the city council. That way, potentially, it may not derail if there's no areas we can't find. If there are, just be aware that we would have to post those additional sites, provide additional notice to the property owners. So that way we have adequate testimony and we notify everyone. So that would be the process for that. But I do think a recommendation, if you're leaning towards that, to recommend staff to provide that further analysis between now and then, that would probably be the best route to go.
And you want it to be in a motion?
Correct. It would be a recommendation. It would be a recommendation. I don't necessarily think that that would be a full motion.
So
That
are
would
we
be
in
a
agreement that
recommendation.
we'd like that recommendation made to staff? Let's not vote on it officially, but is there any question on not doing that? So we're
I
all,
do think it's important that we clarify what we're talking about here, that what we'd be doing, we will someone will make a motion potentially
For a recommendation.
the comprehensive plan, or that we recommend city council approve it with the caveat of X, Y, and Z, right? So that it doesn't come back here.
yes.
As far as Robert's Rules of Order, I don't think it would hurt if you made a motion for the recommendation.
Procedural
Okay.
stuff is always so
I know.
confusing.
Just to cover yourselves.
We've already made a motion and approved this with one abstaining on the mixed use. Now we are making a motion for a recommendation. Commissioner Davis, would you like to put that motion forward, please? I know.
So I move that we recommend the comprehensive plan, that city council approve the comprehensive plan as written with the amendments that we voted on with regard to the mixed use neighborhood, and a recommendation that city staff provide further analysis of potential capacities prior to the October 22nd public hearing for city council.
I think that's great.
I will
Second.
Yes.
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Audience, everybody lay down, take a nap. Wow. We do have at this point a planning director's report.
Sorry, can I just
Oh,
make
I'm
one
sorry.
comment? I apologize. So yeah, I guess as part of that recommendation that was very formal, this is my informal part. There was a lot involved in that comprehensive plan besides just this subset, and not to trivialize this subset. There was a lot involved. And so I think just, yeah, not to forget that a lot of other stuff was really, really good. I think the staff did a great job getting us to this point. Again, this is aligned with my previous comment with regard to specific properties, but also as we look through the whole document, right? That the city council has to take it with some degree of a grain of salt, that it was the broad strokes, best guess effort, not best guess, that's the wrong word, best effort. And yeah, there may be small pieces and bits that people in the city will have concerns with and point out and say, hey, that needs to be adjusted. Yeah, noted. We're not saying it's 100% perfect, but I think it was a very good effort from the city staff to get us to this point. So I just wanted to notify that.
Thank you. I will back up. Do we have any commissioner reports?
No.
Commissioner Davis.
I again wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight and also say I heard some comments on things that are really important and that but they don't fall under our purview. And so I would super encourage everybody to make these comments to city council, take that opportunity because they have a much broader, obviously. I heard things about maintaining.
Some of whom were in the room.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't want, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want anyone to come and feel like they're talking to the city and that their concerns are being ignored just because it doesn't fall under kind of like what we're allowed to recommend or not recommend. So I just would encourage you to take those concerns to the city council.
Something that you guys had said about putting down about the My House. You said that it's up to the owner to take care of that, because I'm all in on that. I've been trying for a long time to be able to dredge it, because it's never been dredged, and I thought, it's turning into the water.
And again, Renee, that would be something that Planning Commission, as commissioners, we don't control, but Public Works would be a great conversation to have that with. Or you can go in and talk with Russ or David. That's what we're talking about, things that we can control and things that we can't. And that's one of the things, when you say we, your canal has never come up in front of us. We've never discussed that because that would be a city issue. That's not a Planning Commission issue. And I'm sorry to make that differentiation, but those are some of those things. I wish I could do all the roundabouts out. That's Department of Transportation. That's not planning, so I think that there would be a discussion, and if we could meet afterwards, maybe I could give you some names of some people we've worked with some of our property that's right near you. Okay? Thank you. Michael Dewar.
Just wanted to express my appreciation for a recent renovation project on 20 Northeast, or 20th Street, I should say. 88 curb cuts and elimination of a whole bunch of trip hazards should make getting around over there that much easier for everybody. So thank you to the city for that.
Nothing else.
I have nothing.
Yeah, nothing myself.
Okay. Do we have a planning director's report?
Thankfully, no.
Then with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
All motion.
We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Unless you got something, Christie.
Too little too late. Yeah, actually, my brother is sending me messages. There, so he's in the eyeball right now. Yeah.